Welcome to Heads Up HR, the podcast from QuestCover, bringing you the latest HR insights, legislation updates, and practical advice to keep your business compliant and your people supported. No jargon, no stress, just advice you can actually use, and the chance to be part of a workplace community that's learning and growing together. Hello and welcome back to Heads Up HR. I'm your host, Perry Johnson, and this time I'm joined by a new guest to the podcast, brand new guest, very exciting. I'm thrilled to be joined by Quest's very own Director of Operations, the wonderful Emma Mystery. Hello, Emma. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for inviting me, Perry, and I'm pleased to be here.
Well, we're pleased to have you. Pleased to have a new perspective on the podcast. So as you're new to the podcast, I think it's nice for our audience to get to know you a little bit more. Those who have attended our webinars will more than likely know who you are already. But for those who aren't aware, could you just explain a little bit about your background in the industry and your experience with HR?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I'm Emma, and as Director of Operations, my actual specialism is area of HR. I've been working in HR now for almost 30 years, so it's a long, long time. I've worked in several different industries, large and small, but more latterly, for the last 20 plus years, I've been within the world of advisory or consultancy, working with predominantly SMEs, and supporting them through their HR challenges, but also helping to navigate through all the various legislation changes and case law, etc. So it's an interesting world that we live in at the moment.
Yeah, and ever changing in the world of HR. I think that's the problem that a lot of businesses face. So I'll introduce the topic for this episode. We're going to be talking around, in the season, we're preparing for our end of year party work event. So considering that, I thought it would be good to talk about work events, and particularly around harassment. With changing legislation from last year, there are more risks associated with planning work events, or more obligations and duties for employers to make sure that they're hitting when they are planning it. And then also just keeping it fun as well. Employers have obligations to do and to achieve when they're organising work events, but you still want the work event to be fun. So I thought you'd be the perfect person to bring on to discuss this, because as our Director of Operations, you've helped plan a variety of our own work events here at Quest, and also helped advise clients on work events that they're planning. So with that experience, what would you say are kind of the most common risk factors you see when planning work events?
Okay, I think the main important thing that companies should really consider is what is it that we're wanting to achieve. Work event can come in lots of different guises. It could be an end-of-year Christmas party, as many companies are organising at the moment. It could be a departmental quarterly event, or it could actually be some kind of conference that they're organising, etc. Anything which is an extension of the workplace is considered a work event, really. And these are the kind of things that companies need to think about is, the basics such as location. What is it we're wanting to achieve? What is the purpose of this event, etc., and what are the risks? So, for example, if we have members of staff who may have disabilities, for example, are we able to cater for everyone's needs? What reasonable adjustments do we need to make? Additionally, individuals who may or may not have preferences in what they eat or what they drink, so vegans, vegetarians, etc., consider those. Religious beliefs as well, they're factors for us to consider. It doesn't mean that just because somebody has a preference or a particular belief that should then impact on everybody else as well. It's what we can do as a business to make sure that we are as inclusive as we possibly can be to achieve the ultimate goal. But then also what's really important is everything stems from the company culture and the code of behaviour and conducts, etc. It's because it's an extension of the business. These are the kind of things that we need to think about. And the more you do this, or the more comfortable you become in doing work events, etc., the better it's communicated and received by individuals.
Yeah, I suppose in that sense, with the communication point that you mentioned, I think that's what I've seen a lot of businesses struggle with, is communicating these kind of guidelines and rules, because you're creating a work event, particularly an end of year work event, to celebrate the achievements over the year. You want it to be a fun event, you want to encourage people to have fun, and not kind of bog them down with all these responsibilities and duties that they have to do. But of course, as a business owner, as an employer, you need to put those points across. So how do you put those kind of points across when you're trying to tell them how to behave in a way that doesn't spoil the fun?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose it does start from the beginning, and that is our company policies and procedures. Now, I must stress, a written policy is not the start and the end of that process. Your policy document should really reflect your actual behaviour and your actual conduct and what you do within the business. But the key thing for me is communication, and communication verbally rather than just in writing. I accept larger organisations or organisations where individuals are quite openly and spread out in different locations, etc. It can be a little bit more difficult to have in-person conversations or more verbal dialogue, etc. And therefore written communication seems to be the best way. However, if at all possible, try and have that open conversation, engage your individual line managers so that they're communicating with their team members, etc. as well, so that the same message and a very positive message is being shared with individuals. But at the same time, what we're also saying is, look, there are boundaries. We do need to think about this. And you need to take into consideration what the rights and the wrongs are. But communication is key.
Yeah, absolutely. Communication, it seems in HR, is always the starting point and the key to everything. I wanted to just kind of talk about harassment in particular surrounding work events. Obviously, there was the new legislation back in October 2023 around sexual harassment, but also just general harassment at work events and employer obligations surrounding those. So I've actually got some statistics on this indicating that there has been a rise in it. So it may be surprising to some to hear that it's actually 1 in 7 workers face abuse at work, according to a major UK survey by the 2024 Skills and Employment Survey by UCL and Surrey University. They found that 14% of workers experience workplace abuse just in that year, which includes harassment, bullying and intimidation. So it is probably a more common issue than people may realise. Another survey, a multi-industry survey by the Unite Trade Union, found that 75% of women who experienced workplace sexual harassment or assault didn't report it as well, with reasons including fear of not being believed and fear of impacts on their jobs. And there has also been a reported rise in employment tribunal decisions involving sexual harassment as well. I think in the period between 2019 and 2023, it's rose by nearly 50%. With all of that in mind, I know that was kind of a lot of statistics to throw at you there, but with all of that in mind and you know, kind of the growing trend, do you think that is a growing trend of people being more aware of these issues and feeling more comfortable with reporting them, and that's why we're seeing an increase, particularly around, you know, the legislation that's been brought in? Do you think that's why we're seeing the increase?
It's really difficult to be certain. I think there's probably a mix. More and more legislation changes, but also raised awareness of different legislation changes, especially sexual harassment, which came into effect October of last year. That certainly will have had an impact. I think in addition to that, there is genuine belief that individuals may not have actually recognised what they'd experienced would be considered as harassment or sexual harassment in particular. Organisations often talk about banter, etc. And, you know, there's such a fine line between what is banter and when does it cross over to some form of harassment or sexual harassment. But certainly media and all the high-profile cases that have been in the media recently, that has a real impact and it raises awareness. But I think also individuals are just not going to accept it anymore. It's, you know, why should I be violated by someone? I didn't ask for that. Nobody gives you the right to do that. And people are making a stand. And I think what's really important from the stats, it would be really interesting to know as well a little bit deeper about the stats, in that are these individuals who directly reported it, or was it actually others that had witnessed it and reported it? Because we are seeing an increase in that as well. Yeah,
actually, there was a recent case law example in which somebody had overheard banter between 2 other colleagues, and they reported it because they found it offensive. So it doesn't have to be between the 2 individuals either. It could be somebody outside of the 2 having the conversation and that still counts as harassment, does it?
Absolutely. The individual obviously has been impacted by that, but as a result of whatever that act was that had been brought to the attention, the company then have a duty to investigate that and deal with that or act on that information appropriately. And if it means having to go down a conduct matter, etc., then so be it. But they can't just ignore it because somebody else has reported it. That has always been in existence with grievances, etc. Is, someone could actually be a witness or not even be fully involved in a situation. They might have overheard a situation. You can raise a grievance, but the sexual harassment, that now brings in the legal duty to prevent and take reasonable take reasonable steps to avoid and prevent sexual harassment. The law is likely to change next year, whereby the legal duty extends to all reasonable steps, which is going to be quite a difficult step to actually achieve as well. But in addition to that, companies have got to understand sexual harassment also includes preventative duty by third parties.
Yeah,
which is where the work events part comes in as well, which makes it incredibly difficult.
Yeah, because with a lot of work events, particularly end of year parties, they will have it in a venue that's shared between multiple businesses, and I think it's almost difficult enough for an employer to handle their own employees and protect their own employees from risks from each other to an extent. How would an employer be able to prevent it happening from a third party? How does their obligations change when it comes to third parties? I
think conducting almost a risk assessment beforehand. I mean, when I talk about risk assessments, I don't necessarily mean, a 10-page document with tick boxes. If you cross the road, before you cross the road, you look left, right, you make sure it's clear before you cross the road. That, in essence, is a risk assessment. So these are the kind of things that we're thinking about. So when you are organising such an event, you will consider what's the date, what's the time, etc., what's the cost. Those are going to be high priority. But you will, without even thinking about it, thinking who else would be there. You can often find another list of companies, etc. But what's really important is not so much what might someone else do. Let's plan and prepare our members of staff so that if they do feel uncomfortable, if they do witness or experience something, have systems or processes in place whereby they can go to someone and seek help. For example, if there are senior managers within the workplace attending the event or directors attending, etc., make yourselves visible, make sure individuals know where you are. Don't stop them from enjoying themselves, but just be there should someone need someone, and make that a very positive message.
Yeah, 100%. So, yeah, I think as well, I know that we kind of can't give a clear indication on the changes that are expected to come to the legislation next year about all reasonable steps, not just taking reasonable steps. But in your opinion, how do you think that will change?
I think that will be incredibly difficult. However, organisations are going to have to look at things more clearly from a preventative aspect. So, for example, our member of staff attends a company's address to conduct their work, etc. We, as a business, should be considering things such as, if our member of staff is going on site to someone else's address, then is that a work address or is that someone's home address? Sometimes small organisations operate from their home. Will the individual be entering into another premises and they will only be the other person there? Can we take steps in order to check that someone, when they arrive somewhere, they have to click in something, there is a stopgap check to make sure they're okay, etc. I think it's really difficult because it almost sounds like we're assuming everyone is a threat or every situation, and that's not what this should be. This is about taking reasonable steps to make sure that we are safeguarding our staff members. So it's putting systems and processes in place. But I think what's also very, very important is that our staff members feel confident and comfortable to be able to approach someone and to feel comfortable that if they are in a difficult situation and they feel uncomfortable or feel threatened in any way, they are able to say, stop, move away from that situation, report it to the business, and feel confident that the business will take them seriously and act on it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that action, the kind of, you've got the preventative side, but then also the action side on the other end as well when things are highlighted. I suppose before we move into the user submitted question for this episode, do you have kind of any other general guidance for work events, for planning work events, such as you mentioned alcohol earlier? Should you have an open bar? Should you set a limit? I know there's no kind of hard and fast rule that applies to every business, but kind of what additional guidance would you give to those who are currently planning work events?
I think what's really important is everyone does want to enjoy themselves at work events, etc. And remember, senior managers and directors of organisations, they are individuals as well in themselves. However, you don't stop being in that responsibility. Having an open bar, not having an open bar, we're all adults. However, the boundaries have to be set by the organisation as well. If you have an open bar, you can have that conversation with individuals about, best behaviour, etc. But if it's an open bar, how are you going to control it? Again, it comes back to that level of communication, the organisation's culture, and how we actually communicate things and set those standards and behaviours. It's very difficult if you've got an open bar to control that. Whereas if you have a limited access bar or individuals have got to pay for themselves, then the onus is on them. But you're not going to be able to stop people.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Don't expect to stop everyone. You can only do as much as you possibly can, but you have to follow through what you've asked from them. Yeah.
And I suppose on an unrelated note, something that I've just thought of is, what about if people go out after a work event? So people from the same company, they go out, but say a manager hasn't been told about it necessarily, but they've heard it through the grapevine that people are going out afterwards. Does their responsibility still carry over to them going out to a bar or something after the event?
Possibly, yes, because it would be argued that that is an extension of that work event. And again, that's part of that whole communication, isn't it? Is you can talk about whilst we're at this event, these are the rules, etc. If you, as a group or team members, etc., decide to go beyond that, remember it's still considered a work event, etc. And it's those boundaries. The problems occur when something goes wrong.
Yeah.
And then the question is that a responsibility of the company, and does it extend into employment reasons, or is it something that's totally separate? There's quite a fine line there, finding that balance. But yeah, absolutely, it could be extended.
Yeah. So you've got to be careful, kind of, or be aware to an extent of all kinds. But as you say, it's that making sure you take the steps beforehand so that if something does happen, you're protected, and also the employee knows that they're protected and that you're there to support them at the end of the day. So now we've been sent in a user submitted question relating to this topic. So I'll pose that to you and see what you think of it. So we've had sent in, we've hired several new employees this month who barely know the team. How do we make sure that they feel included at the party while also keeping everyone else comfortable and safe?
Really good question. During the recruitment process, you can talk about the culture of the organisation, the social aspect of the organisation. If you have a social committee, etc., you can introduce that so that people start feeling involved and more included within the organisation. And that actually could be one of the deciding factors, whether they choose to come and work for you versus another. But also, during that process, you could talk to them about the end of year event or the Christmas party, etc., that you've already organised, so that you've already set the scene. And including them from day one. I think what can become a little bit difficult is when neither of the two parties know each other very well, and then someone thinks, oh, should we not? Yeah. I think I probably would say it's better if the organisation opens up and asks them, and if the individual then says, no, it's okay, it's not for me, or I can't attend, etc., then so be it.
Yeah, there's no pressure
to
attend.
Don't put pressure on the individual, but I think it is for the organisation to include everybody everybody as part of the process. One of the difficulties that we have to think about as well is quite often in organised events there are headcount restrictions, etc. So it might not always be possible for an individual to be included. However, you might be able to put them on a waiting list, and if there are individuals that can't attend, then somebody else can take that place.
Absolutely. And I think it is kind of on that banter point you made earlier as well, is that if they don't know the people that well and the people don't know them, because you kind of learn over time people's limits and what you can and can't say around your colleagues. But with a new starter, you don't have that. So I suppose it's just making sure that everybody makes sure they're included, they feel, part of the team. And that's from the very first day of employment when they join the office, making them feel welcomed. And as you say, it's that point on the company culture, supporting that employee, and then that will make them feel more comfortable at the event. So with that, I think that pretty much wraps up this episode of Heads Up HR. That's all the time we have. I could sit here and talk with you all day about obligations surrounding work events, but that is all the time we have. So thank you for joining with us, Emma, and for your expertise.
Thank you.
No problem. Hopefully we'll have you back again soon for another episode. In the meantime, if you have any burning questions that you want us to cover on a future episode of Heads Up HR, please feel free to email us at marketing@questcover.com and we'll try to build it into a future episode. But for now, take care and thanks again for tuning in. That's all for this episode of Heads Up HR. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to follow and share the podcast, and we'll be back soon with more HR updates and insights from QuestCover.